From the PEP Radio Newsroom, this is a news blast for the PEP Radio YouTube channel. LGBTQ Nation is reporting that transgender allies are criticizing Senator Ruben Gallego, the Democrat from Arizona, for telling a right-leaning website that it's legitimate for people to worry about the fairness of including transgender student athletes and implying that trans athletes threaten the safety of people's daughters. One longtime gay journalist called Gallego's comments appalling. I would have used abysmal, disappointing, disheartening, but appalling works. Gallego is now one of 5 Democrats in Congress who have publicly opposed the full inclusion of trans athletes and girls in women's sports. However, he has voted against legislation to ban trans athletes from girls and women's sports nationwide. As a parent of a daughter, I think it's legitimate that parents are worried about the safety of their daughters, and I think it's legitimate for us to be worried about fair competition, Gallego recently told The Dispatch, a right-leaning digital magazine. There are some sports that some of these trans children should not be playing, he said, adding that local school boards and associations should figure out the competitions where there should be a separation based on players' sex assigned at birth. Indeed, policies on trans sports participation used to be decided by local school boards, state athletic associations, and governing bodies overseeing certain sports and schools. However, Republicans have passed bans on trans sports participation in 28 states, all since the 2020 elections, though courts have blocked 6 of the states from enforcing their bans. Nevertheless, the president has issued executive orders to pressure colleges, universities, and sports governing bodies, like the National Collegiate Athletic Association, to adopt trans sports bans. Gallego added that parents of trans children are also worried legitimately about the health and wellness of their kids and said trans children should be compassionately told, hey, listen, we love you. We want you to be part of our community, but this is just the one place you can't play. And let's find other activities for you to be involved in. That is just through and through transphobia and sexism at its worst. And Representative Gallego, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And you call yourself a Democrat? Really? I hear the Republican Party is hiring. Why don't you go visit them? In April 2023, Gallego voted against H.R. 734, the so-called Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, a federal bill seeking to ban trans women and girls from participating in women's sports. He's also a 4-time co-sponsor of the Equality Act, federal legislation that would enshrine LGBTQ plus anti-discrimination protections into law, and a member of the House pro-LGBTQ plus Congressional Equality Caucus, which seeks to advance progressive queer inclusive legislation. However, online commenters still criticized his recent remarks on trans athletes. Chris Geidner, a longtime gay legal reporter and author of the Law Dork blog, called Gallego's comments appalling and noted that the senator's comments stand in direct opposition to nearly every other Democrat in Congress, except for a few. Democratic Representatives Tom Suozzi and Seth Moulton have made statements against trans female athletes playing on girls and women's sports teams. I don't want to discriminate against anybody, but I don't think biological boys should be playing in girls' sports. Democrats aren't saying that, and they should be. Suozzi said after Democrats lost the presidential elections in November 2024. Republicans spent over $56 million in anti-trans ads during the election. Moulton said, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, but as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. No, as a human, you ought to be afraid to say that because it's just flat wrong, okay? Absolutely no evidence exists. No conclusive, concrete medical or scientific evidence demonstrates that transgender athletes have any sort of physical advantages. In fact, several studies show that quite the opposite is true. There are several disadvantages to going through transitioning. And frankly, no trans athlete has ever said, yes, I transitioned solely so I could play sports on the team that doesn't match my sex assigned at birth. Last January, two Texas Democrats, Representatives Vincent Gonzalez and Henry Cuellar, voted for a federal bill to ban trans athletes from girls' and women's sports nationwide. All other Democratic Congress members voted against it. One of Gonzalez's election season ads stated that he opposes trans women playing women's sports. He said that the issue was a notable one for Latino voters, the majority of whom supported the Republican presidential candidate in the last election. In a November interview with Politico, Cuellar said that Democrats have underestimated how strongly voters feel about the issue, especially in rural America in his district in South Texas. To Representative Cuellar, I would say this is a much bigger country than just South Texas. And while Republicans have said that trans sports bans protect girls in women's sports, critics of this position have pointed out that sexism, abuse, and poor funding harm women's sports and discourage female athleticism far more than trans competitors. Critics also note that most young trans student athletes just want to play sports alongside their friends, and that such inclusion is important to their overall well-being. Many other Democrats have spoken out in favor of trans inclusion in sports. Out Representative Becca Balint, a Democrat from Vermont, for instance, said, "No, we are not going to abandon our support of all Americans, including our trans friends and neighbors and family members. Absolutely not." Instead, Balint said that Democrats should work on strengthening their coalition of voters. And that is our News Blast. If you haven't already done so, please click the subscribe button to stay informed of news that impacts the LGBTQ plus community. Thanks for watching, and happy Pride.